This is everybody's day. This is everybody's day. Of that way that we currently walk, no matter what happens to this mortal body, even if we are sick, once in a while your lines of tongues must still keep sounding. It's to make the enemy know, I'm sick, I can't pace to pray. But in 2 minutes, after 10 minutes, after 20 minutes, understand that this warrior's sword is already cleaving to his hands. He can't drop it even in sickness. For students, he can't drop it even when he fails. He can't drop it when he's about to drop out of school because there are no finances. His sword is glued to his hand because of the promise. The Lord was speaking to me yesterday night. He said, son, you must lay this foundation, because engaging the territory is easy when the enemy has not responded. You are praying and you get to a point where you begin to enjoy the prayer. You begin to increase in numbers. I remember when I was on campus, we were 200 in 100 level. We just felt a burden. Let's begin to pray for revival. And we began to pray and we began to pray. When our 200 level results came out, 200 became 10, 10 became 1. And it was 1 till we got to 400 level. People will pass the field and say, Tolu, you are still praying. As I'm still praying, no. People began to fail seriously. And as they failed, they dropped out. The bad thing was, virtually everyone that dropped out of failure still did not pass. They did not understand that the way to eventually pass was to keep doing what you are doing. So that when they want to give you extra year, because you failed, the enemy himself provokes them to make you leave because he's tired. Let this one go away that I can be free. Do you have a promise? Israel's march towards the promised land and the eventual crossing of Jericho was not because they wished for it. You cannot wish for a territory. Every territory that is currently being governed by the enemy was wheeled out by a certain man. And if another man will lay hold on that territory, he must have the documents that contain the original seal of O. That original seal of O is transported into the hearts of men by the mystery of the promises of God. God will tell you, I owned this thing originally. Now you can fight for it. Some people's territories here are not physical. So as we speak of territories, we may not talk of towns and cities. Some people's territories are their homes. There is a dimension of existence in your family that the enemy is sitting on. And if you find out in God, you will discover that in the beginning, it was not so. I was saying, this morning, that when Jacob was speaking in Genesis chapter 49, he spoke of the lineage of Gad. He said Gad will be overcome by a troop. But he spoke the deliverance of that tribe from Genesis chapter 49, so that when Jesus showed up, a son of the tribe of Gad, now New Testament area called Gadarenes. I had to do some bit of research to get back there. Showed up. And when the evil spirits in him spoke, they said to Jesus, says, we are many. A troop. But a prophetic utterance, a promise had said that none in that clan will be a slave forever under oppressive spirits. So Jesus came on the strength of that promise to exorcise that man. Send the spirits out of him. What promise do you have? Territorial warfare is legal warfare. You must have documents. We prayed to a point, and then a hand appeared to my biological father, slapped him on his knees in prayers, and he became diabetic instantly. My mom called and said, your dad is dying. Come home. I ran back to God. What will you do to him? God said, I will spare him. And that promise from God has become to my biological father a document in the spirit. So that every time he feels life is leaving him, he says, your servant said, you will spare me. And every time his health jacks back to life, what promise do you have? For faith is the substance of the things that we hope for, and our hope is sponsored on this ground. It is also good to know that when God releases a promise to an individual, the fulfillment of your promises are not automatic. I will make you a territorial commander. I'm using that word because that's the writing on the back of our t-shirts. It's an awesome one. God will raise us after that order. When he says that to you, personal prophecies are destined to only be fulfilled if a man understands the cycle of fulfillment. And every time God speaks to you, if God causes a man can escape the curse. He just needs to disalign with the cycle of fulfillment. So David sinned, and God said, well, I'm going to break the kingdom. It couldn't happen under Solomon. Why? Because Solomon had a bank that he worked with. It was a wisdom bank. It's hard to take anything from a man that is wise. So it did not happen to Solomon. Solomon also defiled the throne by his many wives. And then a son came after him. A son who will have also escaped Rehoboam. Because the Bible said that he went to the elderly men and said to them, see what my father did. What should I do? They advised him, and that advice was going to keep him on the throne. 12 tribes. But the Bible said he went to the younger men. And the younger men ill-advised him because they did that. He followed the advice of the younger men. And then that's where we derived to your tent, O Israel. So everybody scattered. And because of the original promise, he had 2 kingdoms. There are a lot of promises that God gives to us about territories, about families, about institutions. But the cycle of fulfillment begins with a promise. It goes to a company. The day God promises you, heaven begins to move you into a company of people who are like-minded. The enemy also begins to orchestrate the movements of men around your life, to make you not see sense in what God has said, to make you desire other things outside the will of God. The companies that you choose will already make us know where you will end. Every company brings a man into the economy of instructions. That's what happened to Rehoboam. And then when instructions come, if you act contrary to the terms of the promise, you miss out on it. When a man misses out, what God does is to take the original promise and give it to another man. This is the reason. The will of God concerning individuals is not really person specific. Listen to me. What I mean is, if God sent you to Onitsha to raise an army for him, and you came here and started doing business, God will give you time. If you don't turn out to raise an army, he will bless you in the business. So you'll be a successful businessman. But when you stand before him, you may have given a lot of money to the church. He will call you an unprofitable servant. You will not go to hell. Your works will just be burnt. Are you with me? What he will have done is to take the mandate that he gave you. I've seen this thing vividly. People go to towns, God gives them a name for a ministry, they play with it, they dump it, somebody shows up 5 years down the line, and he's coming with the same name of the ministry. Same mandate. I hope you know that Rev'd Tolu was not an original. And he almost missed it too. Because he had to decide between $1 billion and 1 billion souls. Because he said yes to 1 billion souls and looked away from $1 billion. That was the pathway to becoming an icon. If he had said $1 billion, the position of favor that he was standing in would have brought him apart with people like Bill Gates at that time. You'll have heard world's richest man. But when his books are opened in eternity, they will see that he will have been one of the strongest evangelists. God takes that mandate and gives to another person. The reason is because God's will over your life is just a micro dimension of what the will of God is. And God will not allow a man who wastes his time to keep wasting it forever.